Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Acting Prime Minister, does he stand by all of his government's statements and actions?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable David Seymour.
Yes, in particular I stand by this government's actions which focus on cutting wasteful spending, which is making a real difference to the cost of living for New Zealanders. Inflation, which was 5.6% when we took office, is now 2.5%. The official cash rate has fallen from 5.5% to 3.25%, and Kiwis see that in falling mortgage rates. Rents are also coming down. According to Trade Me, tenants are paying $20 less a week on new rentals than they were last April. New Zealanders are much better off under a government that manages its own finances as carefully as New Zealanders have had to manage theirs under the previous government's fiscal profligacy.
Parliamentary question. So how are New Zealanders better off when the price of butter has increased by 50%, the price of cheese has increased by 30%, showing that the cost of living continues to go up under his government?
Mr Speaker, dairy products have increased in price because the global dairy price has improved, something that is good for New Zealand's farmers. What would be bad for New Zealand's farmers is if we had a different government that put an avalanche of regulation onto those farmers that produce for New Zealand and the New Zealand economy, pushing up those prices even higher. New Zealanders are better off because inflation overall has gone down, even though that some prices may vary, and sometimes that benefits sectors of the economy that side of the House seems to hate.
Parliamentary question, Mr Speaker. So why are international prices and international factors now the cause of the cost of living crisis when 2 years ago they weren't?
Mr Speaker, it has always been the case that both local and domestic factors influence inflation. What has changed in the last 18 months is we now have a government that is not borrowing $115 billion and leaving us with nothing but inflation and high interest rates to show for it. We have a government that is fiscally cautious, managing its accounts the way that families and firms and farmers had to manage theirs when those guys were in power, hosing it around like there's no tomorrow.
Question, Mr Speaker. Does a 50% increase in the price of butter and a 20% increase in the cost of bread make it harder or easier for families struggling with the cost of living to, quote, make a Marmite sandwich, end quote, when their kids' school lunch doesn't show up, explodes or is inedible?
Mr Speaker, I think it's interesting that the member wants to talk about the Healthy School Lunch program. We're now seeing 67% approval from the students. Actually, they're loving it. Most parents will tell you, if you get more than 2 times out of 3 your kids loving the lunch you send them, then that's winning. We're doing it for half the price that the previous government was doing it. That's a very good example of how this government is doing things better, faster and smarter. And yes, we are achieving over 99% on-time delivery. Now, to come back to those other prices, Mr Speaker, what we are seeing is inflation overall 5.6% when this government came in, 2.5% now. Overall, the out-of-control prices that those people left the New Zealand households with are under control. They can cherry-pick all they like, but you won't butter up the New Zealand public after your last failures.
Answers to questions are not an opportunity to make a grand speech, but points made are points made.
Does adding nearly $25,000 to the projected cost of a medical student's degree help them with the cost of living and help to address critical doctor shortages?
Well, you will have seen today that the government has committed to a 13.89% increase in GP funding. So if your focus is on the patients, who are the people who are actually supposed to benefit from the healthcare system, then this government is putting the taxpayers' money where its mouth is so we can get the healthcare that New Zealanders deserve. After neglect, and just remember, this is the guy who managed to increase the health budget. Oh, he doesn't like it.
A point of order, the Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
I wonder whether the Acting Prime Minister now could address the question that I asked.
Well, I think he started out by doing exactly that, and I just pulled him up when he was starting to stray into material that wasn't quite appropriate for the answer.
Supplementary question. Are increasing council rates bills, higher power bills, higher car registration fees, higher insurance premiums and higher costs for childcare all of which the government has directly contributed to, signs that the government's fixed the cost of living crisis?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I look at the 12% increase in council rates in Wellington, a city that has just built a $2.3 million toilet. And that tells me that this government is on absolutely the right track when it restricts the range of goals that councils should have. And I also notice that there's some new candidates on the ballot this year that people may just want to have a look at if they'd like to act a bit more locally.
Supplementary question. How will taking $13 billion...
Sorry, wait. Just your own team were talking while you're trying to ask the questions.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, not really. I think it's most unfair.
How will taking $13 billion from the pay packets of low-income working women help them with their cost of living?
That's a good question. Well, Mr. Speaker, if that was true, then it wouldn't, but it's absolutely untrue. Unfortunately, we have an opposition that lives in a post-fact environment.
The question.
The Honourable Nicola Willis.
Does the Acting Prime Minister believe that households are better or worse off as a consequence of the government's decision to reduce taxes, including those households with children who on average receive $78 per fortnight extra in their pay packets?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely the case that one of the largest costs that most households face is taxation. And they don't mind if they're getting something for it. But, for example, when you have someone who increases the health budget by 2/3 and ends up with the same number of ICU beds at the end of the pandemic as when he started, you see how easily people's money can be wasted, and that's why they're keen to see tax cuts so they get a little back.
Supplementary question then to the Acting Prime Minister. Has he or the Minister of Finance or the IRD located one single family that's receiving the $250 a fortnight the National Party and the government promised them?
Mr. Speaker, the fact is it's not our job to go hunting for people. I would recommend that that member goes and hunts for one person in the Labor Party who believes that he's going to last to the election.
Sir, a point of order, the Honourable Karen McAnulty.
Thank you very much, sir. Could you please review the answers to those questions and consider whether it is appropriate for an acting Prime Minister to use question time to encourage or essentially campaign for their political party in local elections?
I'll certainly do that, but I'll also review the question that was asked. And the review of that question is likely to conclude that the answer was somewhat inevitable, but I will certainly have a look at it. Point of order, the Honourable David Seymour.
By the same breath, I want you to review the tape and check the Leader of the Opposition wasn't inadvertently campaigning for the ACT Party.
I just said that.